Howdy folks, I'm Rebecca Jolly the Jolly Alchemist, and today we're going to play a jolly game. We are going to do a neutrino forecast for Monday, the 20th of October, 2025. And I was warning you that I was thinking about shifting my content and changing it up because it wasn't, starting to feel a little tight on me, a little uncomfortable. I was starting to feel like I didn't want to go to work, and that's not a good feeling. And I'm in touch enough with my sacral response now that when I feel like I don't want to go to work, something is wrong with the work, not with me. So we're doing it different today. I have because now I have done enough transits the straight boring way that we're in enough of a larger cycle repeating wise that I can just say, well, refer back to the last time this cross came around. And it's very similar. And of course, we're going to discuss the differences, but we're going to do it in a different way with a different format. If you don't like it, let me know. But not that that's going to make a great big difference on what I'm going to do, because I am going to have fun. See, this is about me enjoying the journey and not being so lost in the details. The details are very important. And as someone who has a 60-second gate activation, I'm very into the details. But there's something more than that. You have to take the details and make them into something that can be explained, right? And that's exactly what I want to do, is stop reaching behind my head to explain this and just take it down to the actual sources that I'm working from. So that is what I'm going to do. Let me grab my pointer here and turn around the camera, and let's start our new way of looking at the transits. Okay, so here we have, and this is awkward, so let me fix that. Okay. Here we have the transit for my perspective chart. Once again, I don't know that this is exactly my chart yet because I don't know my exact birth time, but this is what I'm just working with provisionally. It's close enough. So you can see everything that I've got going on and also everything that the transit is giving me as for support, because we have the transit energy over here, and this is the stack of numbers that I would normally be reading to you every day and going through. And we are going to be basing our talk on this stack of numbers, but it's no longer where my main focus is going to be, because I've been saying all these things enough times now that it's boring this way. Let's do it a new way. And so we have the mission numbers here, which I usually spend the most amount of time talking about. I usually skip the nodes because they're not moving, although right now they went back into retrograde and they've gone from 2 to 1. Check that out. Again. So they're like waffling on the edge of retrograde there. We talk about the people energies because those shift every single day. And then I only talk about these global, larger cycle development numbers when there's actually a shift. And the same goes for the Chiron. And of course, you can see here that 64 keys will light up what is going on where, both in my chart and in the transit. So what I do when I'm looking at the transits, I usually come push this little magical secret button over here. Come on, there you go. And it brings up that same picture there. And then you do it again. And it brings up, what is it? Some variation. Me and today's, I don't remember what that is, because what I'm really looking for is this one. This next one is that one, which is just today's transit energy. So these are the 13 activations that we have over here. Chiron, I believe, is not showing up on this list. Correct. So this is what we have here. And of course, in my version of 64 keys, we have this information in a lovely chart down here, which makes the day. You can see the whole day in terms of how it's stacked down here. And you can also, again, push, well, maybe not again, push any of these numbers and it will bring it right up for you, the short definition. So when I've been talking to you and saying, okay, we're in, 3 line 2 or 3 line 1, which is actually today, 3 line 1, pull that up. It's synthesis to create order out of chaos. And then if there's an up or down arrow, I talk about this here. Okay, so this is the general area of the numbers and the relationship of things that we're going to be talking about. So another thing that I'm going to do today is I'm not going to worry about time. I'm going to talk until I'm done talking, and when you're done listening, well, stop listening. But for those of you who want more, in the way of stories and explanations, well, this is what we're going to look at today. So we're going to start off with just talking about the general cross of laws and getting some updates on what's different about this cross as opposed to the other one. The other 3, actually, because this is a right angle cross, which means it's inwardly focused. We're looking at the first line here. So we're looking at the foundation of what it is to be concerned with laws. And we're going to look at some other interesting things on my in my resources here. But first, let's come over here to the book. This is the book of Ra's Incarnation Cross Index. And this is a massively confusing book, difficult to get through. But I am, after several years of owning it, finally starting to get to the bottom of it. So here's where I've written the list of the people, and there's more. There's always way more. Well, not always, but mostly always way more. But these are the ones I figure maybe somebody would have heard of these names and be able to make some inferences about, oh, okay, say Snoop Dogg and John Dewey have something in common because they're trying to establish laws with the emphasis of this version. All 4 versions have a different emphasis as their basis, and that's what makes the right angle cross. 1 cross for each one of these versions. So this version is really based on the 50th gate, which is called the cauldron, because we have here the seething cauldron of values and fears and responsibilities that are happening in the spleen, or our body awareness system. So these people are very much into gate 50. Now, gate 50, line 1 is the immigrant. And there we see that that person who carries this energy is doing some experimentation. Well, not experimentation. They're doing research. They're researchers. And whether they know it or not, they are researchers. You don't really think of Carrie Fisher and Annette Funicello as researchers, but they are. Into the nature of tribal laws, specifically laws about food and laws about sex. Because when you get to the bottom of it, that's what all this tribal circuitry is really trying to explain and handle, is tribal issues, food and sex. Okay, well, that's something to know about the cross of laws. It wants to establish that knowledge there. So Ra gives some examples, like about, let me come back to this over here so we can see what's going on in our numbers and look comparatively, about values for eating. So he makes a joke about, don't go to Baghdad and order pork. That could be a very dangerous thing because of the laws in that area, the tribal laws about food. And then, of course, when it comes to sex, he uses an example of the, let me turn back. I'm doing this kind of just rambling on it. Laws about sex. Oh, yes, he uses male and female circumcision as an example there of laws about sex. And yeah, that gets to coming around to the talk where we start to talk about laws needing to be reviewed. And this is exactly what this cross is doing. It's wanting to refine the laws. So if they're really, really strong laws, maybe they need to be made a little weaker. And if they're really, really weak laws, maybe they need to be made a little stronger. He uses, in this case, the example of talking about, I think it was Montreal, where they decided, because they had this Napoleonic I don't remember where I was reading about that. It was somewhere. Code, they were able to go in and replace old laws, like about horses being tied up to streets, and to update them. At which point Ra confessed that he has been a criminal for most of his life, at least since he was 13 years old and started to smoke weed, because it was for so long illegal. So he was living on a different level of society than the straight top version of what we're getting in this 50th gate cross, or 50th gate, the cauldron and the gate of values. So values change, but he says this part was interesting. The values change according to what's happening in the tribe. So the tribe establishes these laws. It's not the individual, because the individual is here to be mutative and change laws, and we're going to get into that when we talk about the three. But the tribe is dealing with laws, and then on the collective it's totally open, because we're all sharing and we're all trying to learn, and it's a growing process. But that's what tribal business is laws of how we get together, how we decide who's going to eat, who's going to fuck, and how, and how those things are going to work for us, because these are areas where we have to have rules, we have to have laws in order to be able to get along together. The question is, how many and what kinds of rules and laws do we actually need to have? And this brings up an interesting point of something that I've been thinking about recently, and that is how, my own cross, my own struggle is explanation. And a large part of my life has been trying to figure out, how can I explain all the things in the best way, not just explain all the things. Because, I've been studying, before I was studying human design, I was studying MBT, my big toe, with Tom Campbell. And I hear that Tom Campbell is turned into a bit of a fad lately because of Joe Rogan. Everybody's all like, oh my God, Tom Campbell was on Joe Rogan. And it's interesting to see how things are changing with all of that. But anyway, fame. What is it they say? Power corrupts. Well, we'll see about that. I don't know if that's a true limitation. But I was thinking about that in those terms, especially since human design came to me from, really, MBT, because it was through a meditation bubble that we discovered a wonderful woman in Budapest who introduced us to design, and really blew open my world and changed a lot of things for me. Thank you, Mariana. And so let's see. Where was I? Laws, food, sex. It'll swing around again on the guitar. Oh, and by the way, oh yes, I do remember what I was talking about. Okay, first, a little bit of a detour though. When I said the other day, swing around, it'll swing around, wait till it swings around again. I was looking for the name Arlo Guthrie and his song Alice's Restaurant. So that's the one. And we are coming up on Thanksgiving. So what a wonderful time to listen to that song again. I mean, not immediately, but we're moving in that direction. So, it's been my life's work, really, in some ways, to try to figure out how to explain things, especially when I became a mother, because I thought when I became a mother, it was going to be really, really cool, because I'm going to have all this time to just explain things to my children. And, we'd have years and years and years. Of course, I would be able to explain everything that needed to be explained, right? The folly of youth. So I basically spent all the years with my children, and because they were largely homeschooled, that's a lot more time than the average child actually gets to spend with their parent, talking and trying to explain things. Now, because I myself did not fully understand the nature of everything, I was not able to explain it well enough. So I ended up with a dynamic like many people have of their children resent them, and there's all this, trouble and trauma and drama and blah, blah, blah. Well, we had our fair share. I was an experimenter, and I was in a big experiment. I didn't really know how to do all the things. I couldn't control all the variables, so mistakes were made. However, I don't have to feel guilty, because I absolutely tried my best. So The race or the struggle to explain things sufficiently has continued to elude me because there's so much to explain and there's so many people that have specialized in so many things. So it's like everybody has a teeny bit of the puzzle because everybody in this world has a unique perspective on what is going on. Right? Every time we get jacked up in life, every time we have a trouble, every time we have a trauma, it forces us to slow down and look at that exact area of life and examine it more closely, whether we want to or not. And then afterwards, while we're all in therapy to recover from all that, we're figuring things out and putting together a system. And of course, this is for most everybody. By whom I mean people who carry first-line themes. And of course, there are a few rare people, and I do know one, who do not carry any first-line themes. And so they're not really going to be interested in this kind of a foundational study. Lo and behold, what do you know? She doesn't watch my transits because she's not interested in getting down to the foundation of things. Speaking of which, it's time for me to begin addressing my loyal listeners because I know there's a group of you. And so I want to try to specifically reach out to you, whoever you are. And I know some of who you are, but I don't know all of who you are. I don't need to. But since you're already interested enough in human design to sit down and watch these boring ass transits every day, maybe you're interested enough to get more information about what's going on. So anyway, the larger aspects of me explaining everything to people is more of what happens over at Jolly Alchemy. And here the focus is really on this one modality or this one belief system of human design. It is not everything. It is not, it's not a religion. It's not a cult, but although I can't see how it could be made into such a thing by people with very limited perspectives, black and white thinking. It's a stage, it's a phase, but it's part of maturing to realize that the world is more complicated than black and white. It's more nuanced than that. It's gray, very gray. So then we swing around to mentioning my friend who's got a channel, verygray.com, and also a YouTube channel, Very Gray, in which he is attempting to do just that. Bring more nuance into the world to all these people that are like left, right, conservative, liberal, and to say, look, guys, we're getting not radicalized, but, separated on these issues. And there's not maybe as much difference between them as you might think, as in so many areas, we need more nuance. We need to understand the nature of the very gray. So anyway, moving on. Back to the cross of laws. And explanations. So I feel like we've gone together beyond the point of just pure line explanations, and I want to start to explain my understanding of larger influences, larger cycles, and more touching on what I've learned from this, because y'all have only been on this adventure with me for a few months, but I've been tracking the transits all year long. So I have a perspective that's even longer of what we've been doing together, of looking at these cycles and understanding what's going on. And I thought, well, that might actually be some interesting information. Let's get into that quickly. Before I do that, I want to quickly talk just a little bit about Gate 3. We talked about 50, the cauldron, and how this is about the cross of law. So we're looking at the nature of tribal lawmakers and how they want to do. And there's one more point I actually want to say about that, and that is that in this 50th gate, I'll turn around so we can look. Line 1. We're talking about people who are in an introspective process, right? This is first line. This is foundational thinking. So this is people who want to research and get a foundation to understand the nature of laws and do that at a really basic level, so that then they can have information to go out and share with others. And because it's on the right angle, it's going to be inwardly focused. These people are not entirely aware of necessarily the consequences of their laws. And a lovely example of that, again, would be this law about circumcision, male and female circumcision, whether it's actually written law or it's just a traditional law, tribal law. It's still a law. In fact, I do believe circumcisions are still taking place for males and females across the globe. And what an example of a right angle law, a law that's not really looking out over the distance and seeing the larger picture, but just stuck down in this traditional 60 place, which of course we are getting a 60th, 360 channel here from the transit, because our Pluto activation is in 60 line 6, so it's looking into holding on to things more than the actual 3, which is the mutative gate. So the other thing I wanted to do, that's what I wanted to say about 50. I wanted to talk about 3 in the third line just a little bit, so that could inform our discussion as well, because this is really, for all intents and purposes, the most important energy activation to look at for the day. Yeah, if you're a reflector or an observer, looking at how all these things change and seeing the transition from each line within the 57th gate and then moving into 32, okay, fine, we can talk about, all right, right now we're in the energy of 48, so the well and depth. Then we'll be moving into the energy of 57, which will, of course, be making a connection later on in the day from 57 to 20 to give us that person of action, flash of inspiration kind of energy again. And then 32 here, which will come and give us a flavor of what we just finished from our continuity gate there. So that's an interesting thing. We're getting a little blip of that 32 energy again in the moon today as it travels through the transits. But really, the point I'm getting to is it's the 50 and the 3 that are the most relevant energy. If you're meeting people, cool, check out the meeting numbers. And if you're a person who really is a buff for watching the news, then you're really going to want to be aware of changes that are going on in these numbers, because you'll be able to see those changes happening. And by the way, we will have a change happening today in Saturn. It's moving from 36.5 to 36.4, and 36.4, 36 being, of course, the gate of crisis, and it's part of this emotional learning process, collective abstract, submitting yourself to the experience after a crisis. You have your experience, you learn from it, and you can talk about what you learned emotionally. So it's moving into line 4, which is secrets, secret knowledge as a protection against crisis. And maybe that's why I'm feeling today this need to talk about the transits in a new way, because it's actually doing a 61st gate activation, which you will see I'm coming by honestly. I have it unconsciously, but I do have a 61st gate activation that is looking at the nature of the mysteries of the universe in a larger kind of way. So anyway, secret knowledge as a protection against crisis. Well, the knowledge of the transits isn't really that useful to us unless we can put it in and apply it on our lives and see how that's going on. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit more. I also can run through this real quick. Down here is my transit journal. So here's where I'm making my own notes about what's going on. Usually I'm writing a lot more notes over here. Like you can see, this is more what's normal, except it would have had the list of peeps up here. I stopped writing that out because it got to be too boring. And then I just reminded myself to mention the peeps here. But normally this is what's going on as far as the activations for the day. And you can see just real quickly that 3-1 synthesis to create order out of chaos is the main theme of the third line. I definitely want to talk about the third line in more detail, but it does have an up arrow on it. The innate understanding that confusion is normal and will always exist before clarity can be achieved and a new order will emerge through synthesis. Cool. Well, we have the 48 talking about action, lovely, as that's going through the moon. And of course, we talked about 57 and 32 coming next. Then we'll have 41 and of course, 43, line 1. That'll be happening twice there. So cool, but we already talked about 43, line 1 yesterday. So we come back to here for that activation. Patience to provide depth and form to an insight, which is on a larger scale. What I'm doing right now is I'm providing depth to an insight that I had last night when I got high and started thinking about things and starting putting together larger pieces of a puzzle, which I thought, why the fuck not share that information for the people who have shown their loyalty all this time and interest in learning enough about human design to actually watch these transits. So yeah. We're also going to be seeing some 18 energy. Now, of course, you know about the 18. We talk about it over and over again. Focus on the broken there. And in this case, we're going to be looking at 18.5, but it will be moving into 18.6. So I've talked about this before. 18.5, the line of therapy. This is the line of the therapist and the person who needs therapy. So crazy people need therapists and therapists need crazy people. Apparently, that's the way it works in the wiring. And then 18.6, boundlessness, departure to find new horizons. So, yeah, okay, so that's enough on that. And let's switch over to the line companion here, talking about, no, I don't want to talk about 50. I actually want to come in and talk about 3 for a bit. So let me get to the other place where I have 3. Okay, so I've been looking at this a few times and I'm finally getting some things together here where it's talking about really the nature of confusion. So what we're looking at here is the 3rd gate in comparison to the 60. Right? So the 360 is the channel of mutative change. This is coming out of the root center, and the root center works by jolts of electricity at random times. So it will jolt us when it's going up to learn things in 3 different ways. On this side, we have our abstract collective learning. This is our cyclical learning. We've been talking about cyclical learning a lot because we've been focusing on gate 42, this gate of the endings and maturity. You can see I myself have a little bit of a not a problem, but a tendency to get out of balance in this 42nd gate because I carry the 53. That's the nature of what it is when we look at our charts. Anywhere we see that we have one gate but not the other in a channel, you're looking at a design of somebody who's going to be kind of focused on figuring out what this is, because electrically inside our bodies, we want to have a connection between that 59 and whatever else is in the channel. So on this side, to get back around to where I was, it's swinging around on the guitar. This is our logical learning cycle. So this is collective understanding. This is about sitting still and focusing on something enough times until you can establish a pattern for the future. Then in the middle, we have the individual stream, which is the one we're really talking about, gate 3. And this is about confusion in the beginnings, the desire for mutative change. And what is it changing? The traditionalist, the way things always have been. So you have this real clash of old and new happening in this channel here, and it gets fired occasionally. Well, I would render a guess that it's going to be firing today for a lot of people, because today this channel is active for the whole entire world. So those of us who do not usually carry root pressure, and you can tell by the fact that this is orange on this part of the thing, I do not actually carry a root activation on normal days. So I'm sensitive to root pressure. And today I can feel it. Today it drew me up out of bed. Usually when I get high in an evening, I'll lay around in bed the next day and do nothing much and spend my time thinking, I don't want to go to work. I don't want to do anything. By the way, these are my Law and Order ties, and there's a whole bunch of explanation there, but maybe we'll get into that tomorrow, and it's too hot to wear 17 ties all at a time. This is how I usually group them. They're in these kits so that I can turn them into upcycled, recycled projects, skirts, sweaters, all kinds of things. And so I didn't want to break this up, but I really felt like this described the thing that I'm getting to, but later, because I'm swinging around to talk about the third gate, right? So we're looking at the third gate. We can point it out right here. You can see that I myself do not carry either one of these activations, but it's about difficulty in the beginning. And I do carry the beginning cycle. So there is some difficulty in my process as well that I've had to be aware of. 3-1 is about synthesis, and synthesis is one of those titles that's difficult for people to understand because it's not an easy word. What does synthesis mean? Synthesis is about understanding the nature of confusion, that beginnings are confusing. There's all this extra vibration. We don't know the way it's going to go. So looking into the future for us globally, you can see that we are in a time of transition. We are in a time of mutative beginnings. We're actually really going to be starting a time of mutative beginnings in 2027 when the human form starts to actually change and upgrade again. Of course, that's the rumor. We'll see for ourselves how that works in about 2050 when the first generation of people who are physically capable of having the real mutation have not only been born, but also been able to grow up so that we can see what we're getting in these new people. And fingers crossed for all of them. That does not look like an easy job. Not jealous of those people, but it's an experiment. It's part of our growth and evolutionary cycle, which swings us back around to the third gate, because Ra says that it's really an important part of the evolutionary cycle to realize that there's confusion in beginnings. That's the way we work. It's okay. That's not broken. In fact, he said, if you have an activation in 3-1 and you're not aware of being confused, then you're extra confused, because there's definitely confusing shit going on in your life. And if you think you've got it all figured out, especially in the early phases of your life, you kind of got another thing coming. You're probably completely deluded as to the nature of what's going on. I don't know. I don't carry the 3-1. I don't know anybody who does carry the 3-1. Although I do know somebody who carries the 3-4. So it'll be very interesting to discuss that in a few days. But today we are talking about the first line. And let me see if there was anything else that I really, really wanted to mention about that. In this case, 3-1 does have an up arrow on it, and I read it, but let's look at that again real quick. It doesn't really talk about it here because, of course, he's in the beginning of the book in the line companion, and he hasn't really settled into the style that he carries a little bit later on, I've noticed. So he's not actually giving the definitions of the exaltation and the detriment, but of course, I already read that. Where was it? Here. The innate understanding that confusion is normal and will always exist before clarity can be achieved. So it's all right. There's going to be confusion in the beginning, but it's going to stabilize. Just like we're talking about, going into the future, and everybody's so afraid of the future. What will it bring? Will there be chaos? Will there be apocalypse? Will all the grocery stores close? Will we be eating each other? Dogs, cats? What? Well, it's all right. I got a tip the other day. It was interesting that we're going into a 6-line age. So I have been talking about that in different things like short videos, but I haven't really talked about it here because here I've just been focusing on the transits, whereas now I'm trying to bring together different levels of knowledge so that we can look at things from a larger scale, because we have something of a basis for talking, what I call common ground. Yeah. So we're looking at the future and trying to prepare ourselves to handle the energies of the future. And of course, because we are at this crux point between these two great big 441-year-old cycles or something like that, to have rather more chaos in this beginning than in some of the others that we've had, evolutionarily speaking. And okay, swinging back around, the six-line beings. The little tip or quote was about when six-line beings are healthy and doing their jobs, there is change in the world. Now, I found that to be massively comforting because, well, there's just as many sixes as other numbers. So about a sixth of the population is carrying a significant a bit of six-line themes. And Ross says, all of us who don't carry those six-line themes, at some point or other, we've got to go to a six and get their advice, because they're the ones who are able to stand above and look beyond. So that makes sense to me that although it seems like it's very unstable right now, politics are scary, we have all this tyranny and fanaticism and zealotry and return to old cycles that we already know don't work, Nazis. Like, okay, if you really need to do that energy again, I guess, but do it in you, because anybody who's already felt it or had it doesn't want that energy anymore. That led to a horrible time on the planet where there was so much death and suffering. Like, get a clue, people. It's no longer possible to do those things. We've got to actually come out of that and recognize that this is moving into a real stable, what will be a very stable change as soon as we get out of the crux. And in some ways, 2027 represents the tipping point. Although personally, I think in some important ways we've already passed the tipping point. But that's another subject, another discussion. Okay, so let me see if I've talked about all the things that I really wanted to talk about today. Actually, I think I have. There's so much more to do, but I don't want to break it on all you people all the time. At some point, oh, let me show you this. This is cool. Let's do this first. Okay, so here we have our today's activation, right? So this is the 20th of October, 25, and we're looking at the first line of the right angle cross of laws. Well, now we can actually go back and look at what we saw in the transit the last time we had the first okay, this is not the first. Okay, so I have two things to show you. All right, so this one is the other side. So let me explain this. I have been talking about the underlying energy, right? The underlying energy of the cross. I have been telling you what those are and tracking down those gates for you. Like here, you can see. On the conscious side, for somebody who was born today, they're carrying the 50 line 1 and the 3 line 1. The underneath energy, the unconscious energy, or the imprint that for a person who was born today received in their unconscious self, they would be receiving 56, 3, and 63. Well, that day was here in the transit, and we did it together. And you can go back and watch this transit again if you want. It's the transit for 21 July. Now, I know that when you're looking at the list of ancient transits, it's just listed by date. You don't see anything interesting. That's super fucking boring unless you have a specific reason to look at the 21st of July. But we can see that these people are carrying as their underlying activation to be in the center, the gift to be in the center of attention. Oh, that was a nice energy. I actually remember feeling that one in the first time around. Because that's when I was on my walkabout in Vegas and I was the center of attention. And I told the story about that. That was actually interesting. Okay, so anyway. And that one has an up arrow also. The gift to have control over expression and take center stage. And then gate 60, which of course is the other side of that channel from the 3. So people who have the cross of laws automatically have this channel of the 360 activated in their bodies, the conservative attitude that ensures security. Okay, cool. So that's good to know. Other thing that I want to show you in relation to that is back here on our transit, because what I did was I pulled up a transit for here today. So here we're looking at, this is relevant to the transit, right? Because here you see the summation of everything that I was talking about. Here we have our 51 energy on the conscious side, and then our 3-1 energy on the conscious earth, and the 56-3 and the 63 showing up on the unconscious side. So these will be the activations that a person born today at the very beginning of the day. And just so you know, I always mark those transits in the first minute of the day here on the West Coast in Portland. So this is a Portland transit, but of course I'm looking ahead in the future and covering transits that are going throughout the day and into the future, and that's where you get this stuff. So today is this transit transferred onto the transit of what was going on there. But I think that's too much for right now. It's a little too much detail. Let's come back to here where we can just go over the whole thing, and I can start to introduce the concept that this is the actual energy of a human born today. So the person who is born today is going to be carrying these energies consciously. This is who they're going to be thinking that they are as we go through the lines and we look at these activations, right? Whereas here, the transit that we took 3 months ago on the Cross of Laws is going to be deciding what's true in this person's body and how the outside world is going to be experiencing this person. And we can also see the nature of what some of their intrinsic challenges will be. This is a very lightly defined generator right here who has a 1-3 profile. So they're going to be consciously very interested in establishing foundations and research, getting foundational knowledge, and on the unconscious side, being an experimenter. Like I said, I think I've basically talked enough, even though I'm a talker, I have so much more to say, but some of that can wait till you come to me individually, and some of it can wait till tomorrow, because tomorrow's a new day, and now that I don't have to be limited by, like I was before, like trying always to make it shorter, trying to talk faster, well, fuck that. What's the point? If people are interested enough in human design to sit and listen to somebody talk about it, then I might as well talk about it as long as I want to talk about it. Of course, I will also make some shorts to talk about different things that can go on different platforms, but this is the one for today. This is it. So that's the transit. Drop me a line and tell me what you think about that, either in the comments or coming over to send me an email at jollyalchemy.com. And tell me what you think of the new format. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is there something that you're missing? Something that you'd like to see more of? Because now we're going to be entering a phase of stronger experimentation as I establish a new pattern that's going to be making me more happy and hopefully giving you information on yourself, human design, me as a teacher, and how I see the world shaping up, how I understand the problems of the world, the solutions of the world, and how I'm figuring out how to make them not just explainable, because my problem is I can explain that shit if you give me 17 hours, but who has 17 hours? Nobody. I have to condense it. I have to synthesize it. I have to make it smaller. I have to aphorize it in order to be able to bring the wisdom down into something that can be put into a 40-minute video or a 20-minute video or a 1-minute video. So that's my job. That's my work. Come around and see me tomorrow as I continue this work and get your own advantages out of my experiment. Until then, ciao.